societies. Particularly nice one from 1925 of Scouts on the Antrim coast. And as Anna said, we have some wonderful images in our Cooper photographic collection of circuses, which would have travelled throughout Ireland in the early 1900s, such as the Wilson and Duffy Circus. Images of clowns and acrobats. You might recognise that one from some of our glasswork in the building as well. Events. Many important events have been captured photographically and appear in the archives. Here we have the signing of the Covenant by the Ulster politicians on the 28th of September in 1912, opposing Home Rule for Ireland. An important offshoot of this was the Parallel Declaration, which was signed by women also opposing Home Rule. It was signed by over 200,000 people, so that was a great boon for the women's suffrage movement at the time. Events of international significance are recorded in photographs such as this image. It shows troops marching off to fight in the Great War. They're passing Belfast City Hall here. And equally significant, but on a local scale, here we have a severe flood which occurred in Strabane in 1912. You can see all the onlookers looking up at the photographer. And I think the ladder was actually put across there to stop all his very expensive equipment from flowing into the water. And that's the aftermath of the flood. Here's another scene of local devastation. This is by the early photojournalist Herbert T. Allison from Armagh. Here capturing the Armagh railway disaster of the 12th of June 1889. And to this day it's still the worst railway disaster that's ever occurred in Ireland. 80 people were killed. And I think there were changes made to regulations to do with train braking systems at the time. And here's a happier event, the All Lammas Fair at Ballycastle, taken around 1920, captured by the photographer Robert John Welsh. We have some amazing images of the aftermath of the Belfast Blitz. I'm sure you'll agree each one is a work of art in itself. And here we see Irish troops who were involved in the D-Day invasions during World War II. And then some of our younger government files contain images of our recent conflict on our own shores. And here's the aftermath of the Abercorn bomb. And scenes that many of us will be familiar with of body frisk searching, part of everyday life in the 1970s and 80s. But to end on a lighter note, we're starting to make very many of our photographic collections available for the public to view and comment on as well using the website Flickr. At the moment we're receiving about 250,000 page views per month on this site, so it's really taking off. Collections we've added are wedding and family portraits from the Allison collection, that's a photographer from Armagh. The images of Belfast slums by Alexander Hogg. Also, unidentified studio portraits from the Photographic studio in Strabane, and Anne mentioned earlier there, people are beginning to recognise some of the people in those images and correspond with us to let us know who they are. So that's a very exciting project. Colleagues and myself will be travelling to Strabane in April to do some workshops there with local history groups and the local community to try and engage a bit more and really get that project off the ground. So please do have a look at our area on Flickr, and I'm hoping this presentation might have inspired you. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, good evening everyone. I don't know if I can follow with Joy and Anne's talk, but certainly I'll give it a go. Here we are talking about map collections in PRONI. As you know, PRONI has a huge range of maps and map collections. We have about 10,000 private archives, and hundreds of those collections contain maps in them. The maps we hold will range from the late 17th century through to the sort of 1990s. And there are a few major collections that are devoted solely to maps, while also there are collections that have maps in them, and we'll talk about those. So one of the major collections we have would be Ordnance survey maps relating to Northern Ireland. And we have about in the region of 40,000 maps for the period that you see here. Now this one is of County First survey of 1833, and you can see there it shows you the area of Strangford Lough and Colinchie and Mid County Down. And again, it wasn't very detailed. It was done by Royal Engineers who were all over from England to carry out the survey work. And as it happens, Ireland was the first place to be completely surveyed in the British Isles. Now obviously Ordnance survey maps then changed. You have a more detailed map here of 1859 showing you the field boundaries within the map. And as the revisions happened, more detail was added. So Ordnance survey maps can be used for anything from local history, family history. They show road layouts, fields, the location of houses and so on. So they really are useful for trying to find out where someone was living or how the changes in the topography of Ireland have changed. As we move on then to about 1920, slightly more detail now with shading to show the areas of where the tidal flow will be exposed to the mud and so on. Also then you have more detail with the acreage of the townlands and the parishes in total. And again there will be boundaries to show the different changes over time. Just to go on, then you'll have, as the Ordnance survey became more developed, they then went into the area of establishing town plans for all of Ireland, and in fact the UK, but again they focused on Ireland first. So they started doing the town plans in the 1850s and worked right up to the present day. But here we have a sample here of Coleraine of 1882, which is quite detailed, and again we have a full set here in PRONI of all of those revisions from the 1850s. Again, you'll have quite a lot of detail showing the street names which may have changed over the years, and also locations of businesses and firms which will also be highlighted. Then obviously we have valuation records, and they're incredibly important, and given the lack of other records that we have here, they at least tell you where people were living. And they relate, if you're being on their website, the Griffiths valuation revision books would be available to view there, and these would be the corresponding maps. Now this map actually relates to the original valuation of 1861. Now the original, or the valuation of Ireland, took place over a number of years, and it took sort of started 1848 to about 1863 was the period that it covered. Obviously they started in the sort of southern counties of Ireland and worked their way north to do the valuation. So by 1861 they were doing this part of County Down. Again, that's that map I showed you earlier on, which was an Ordnance survey map which has been superimposed with the valuation information. Now the valuation books that we have in PRONI tell you the name of the person, of the occupier, the landowner, and where exactly are the acreage that the person held, and a small description of that holding. Then with the valuation maps which we have here, you can then identify where the person was living and tie it to a particular dwelling, and also the boundaries of the fields that the person held are also identified, so you know the exact limitations or extent of the farm, which is incredibly important, as obviously lands change between owners and so on. But this is a snapshot in time, and again we have revisions of maps right up until the 1930s. There were 4 subsequent valuations, or 3, the original valuation, sorry, plus 3 revaluations carried out up to 1935. Then another major area that we would have, again, PRONI was one of the first archive institutions to recognise the importance of lands as estate records to make up for those that were lost in the Four Courts. Most other government archives were focusing on archives created by the government of the day and official bodies, but again, Northern Ireland was first in there. We would have literally thousands of land as estate maps, which have varying degrees of detail in them. Some are plain, some are coloured, some have shading and so on. But here's a few samples here of what we have. Again, ranging right across Northern Ireland, but also Donegal, Cavan and Monaghan, and maybe a few other townlands that perhaps, or parishes that maybe landowners held in the Republic, or what is now the Republic. So you have here the Shaftesbury Estate, and the Shaftesbury Estate would have been in Antrim and Down in Donegal, and this is a townland of Gulladoo and Brody Glen from 1767. They're in mint condition, and again it's in Donegal, and if you're lucky enough to be from that area, you've hit gold, and there you have your townland shown with all of the dwellings and so on in place. And if you wanted a copy of that, I'm sure you could get one made, a very good quality one. Indeed, here we have then other cartographers went throughout Ireland. Basically, the purpose of lands as estate records was for landowners to know what they held, and particularly when buying an estate, they wished to know what they were sort of buying and the extent of the holdings and so on. So here we have a map from Dromiller in County Down, I think it's near Dromara, and you see the cartouche in the left-hand corner, showing you the sort of description of what the map is, who it's being surveyed by, and who it's being for, and then the covering date of when it was made. That was 1811. And you had a large number, well, I'll say large, in the low sort of dozens of surveyors throughout Ireland who plied their wares and would have shown examples of their work to prospective clients. And they would have carried along a catalogue of what they could do for you, and then the landowner would be impressed, presumably, and commission them to carry a survey of their estate. And that's how this was generally done. But again, a lot of the surveyors were either trained in Dublin or in London or even in Paris and so on to get their skills to a sufficient degree of accuracy. And you see here the various, there'll be, in this comes from a volume of maps, and each of these parcels of land will be then indexed to tell you who owned the land and the acreage and so on. There's a guide or a key down the side here in this case, but it's just to sort of show the different sort of colours. You can see the shading here of the elevation of the hill in the bottom part of the map, and obviously the scale. Again, depending on the ability of the cartographer, he may not have included the scale, he may not have been sufficiently educated to sort of put that information in, or may not have been asked to do it by the client. Again, PRONI would hold probably, we're talking large numbers, thousands and thousands of estate maps, and probably in the region of 1,000 volumes of estate maps, of which this is one. This comes from the Hall Estate, from the Narrow Water at Newry in County Down, and this is sort of the second page of the volume to show you what was contained. And again, very expensive to do, and now a lot of these maps are being cut up and spliced off and sold off. But obviously we've obtained them PRONI, they've been deposited here, and they're here forever for people to use. And here's the content of one of the maps that's inside. Again, cartographers have different styles, and depending on where they were taught and what the client expected to get. He would have said, I want that image that you produced for my friend Lord Londonderry, for example, and he produced a copy of that for his estate. But again, you see the adjacent townlands have been identified. The townland, this is of Burren in County Down by Alexander Richmond in 1836. And again, it shows you the shading, and that was just to show the expertise of the cartographer. Now again, we have other ones here. This is the Earl of Antrim Estate Papers, which is a huge archive in PRONI. And this shows Port Rush, and you can actually see the houses have got elevations and so on, so it's very detailed and a beautiful large map. It would probably, the original would fill that table if you laid it out. So these are large maps to be expected. And again, 1857. So you're probably wondering, why is an estate owner doing this in the 1850s? Well, it's presumably to record what he holds, but also to impress his friends and peers and so on, to say, this is what I hold, and the other would be impressed by that. Then you have the other thing here is the Gosford Estate in County Armagh. Now this was done as the Gosford family were about to acquire the Graham Estate. So whether it was carried out by the Graham family or by the Gosfords, presumably by the Grahams, to show what was being sold. And it contains images of 12,000 acres of land, which is a significant amount of land. And again, the book would perhaps hold